Good morning. My name is Shawn Gillespie. Thank you for inviting me to be here this morning. I am the Director of Production Incentive Administration and Finance. I'm here to talk about production incentives, which has been a hot topic the past 4 or 5 years, because now people know that they can go elsewhere to make movies. You don't have to stay in Los Angeles any longer. And unfortunately, a lot of movies are leaving Los Angeles because of the production incentives that are being offered throughout not only the country but throughout the world. A little bit of background about myself. I joined Entertainment Partners this past September. Before that, I've been working on the East Coast as a freelance production accountant. I worked on that memorable show Army Wives for the past 4 years. I was instrumental in getting the South Carolina rebate passed so Army Wives could film in South Carolina, because that's dictated, the story dictated where it was going to go, but it was more of a sweetening of the pot once they got a 30% rebate back. Before that, I worked on Leatherheads, another great movie with George Clooney and Renee Zellweger that took advantage of the North and South Carolina incentives. I've worked on Evan Almighty in Virginia, which has a very small incentive, so unfortunately a lot of projects are not going there right now. Before that, I worked on Talladega Nights in North Carolina. I've worked on Out of Time and Fast and Furious in Florida. I worked in Italy, England, Mexico, Canada, Puerto Rico, which is really a Commonwealth, but they have a really big incentive now and they're getting really hot to start filming there again real soon. So this is kind of what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about the background of production incentives, the legislation trends, the key variables, what we do, our EP incentive solution resources, the types of incentives, the key jurisdictions. There's about 6 jurisdictions right now where everybody's going to film because they are so profitable for the producers to go there, and then the other services that we're beginning to offer to our clients. So what are production incentives? Production incentives are offered in many states throughout the US in various forced jurisdictions to encourage film production to go there. They are either offered as cash rebate or tax credits, both refundable and transferable, and I'll get into that a little bit later. In addition, numerous jurisdictions offer sales and use tax, like in North Carolina and Florida and Georgia. You don't pay sales tax if it's something that is going to be used in the actual production of the film, which can take, if it's 8% sales tax, that's a big amount of your budget that you're saving. And why do we have production incentives? Economics, it brings jobs to the local economy. It brings tourism, actually. When I was working on Sex and the City, they would have tours of New York City where the girls supposedly hung out. And it's crazy, the people that would want to go and see, like they actually believed Samantha Jones existed. Crazy. And of course it made a lot more money for HBO because they licensed the name Sex and the City. Same with Army Wives in Charleston. They've started a tour of all the homes where the women supposedly live. And it's so crazy to me that these people actually believe these fictional characters exist and that they make it a destination. But it's been very profitable in South Carolina, and we've also started where the characters were supposedly going to have dinner. They would have tours of the dinners. So, and that's one thing because incentives have been in scrutiny lately. So when we actually went to the legislation and said, look, we're pumping all this money into your economy. And they said, well, how do we know you're pumping money into your economy? And we said, well, these restaurants, these local vendors, they're all profiting from Army Wives. Of course, one of the main reasons is jobs and then creating an infrastructure so more productions can go. Like for instance, in Army Wives, we took an old fertilizer factory and turned it into a production soundstage. And so when we weren't filming there, other smaller productions would come in and use the facility. So it was helping to create that as a place where people would go and want to film. Canada began to attract productions with what they called the runaway productions in the late 90s, when all the productions were leaving California and going up to Canada. Because of the incentives and because of the dollar, they the exchange rate. Right now it's about the same, so Canada is not getting a lot of the productions any longer. I actually worked on Titanic up in Canada. We built a lot of the props up there because that's when they had a really good incentive for us to go up there, and so the whole production moved up to Canada, and then it moved to Mexico, and then a little bit of it was actually in London, all because of it was cheaper, and the more money they make, the more money they save making the product, the more they can put up on screen. Louisiana and New Mexico were the first to really start the incentives in 1992 and 2002, and after that it's just grown like crazy. I think there's about 46 states right now that actually offer incentives, and it all varies. And the productions, I always argue with my bosses about this because they always say it's a creative requirement, but it's, my experience is they go where they can get the most bang for their buck. So, I don't know if you just saw the battle, it was called Battle Los Angeles, it was filmed in Louisiana, and the original title was Battle LA. And so everybody thought, oh, and if you saw it, it looks like Louisiana. It doesn't look like Los Angeles at all. And they went there because it was cheaper. Because bottom line, they could film there and put more up on the screen than if they filmed here, which is unfortunate, but it's the truth. The available funding, each state has a limited amount of funds that they offer each year. So if you want to go to Louisiana and there's not a funding there, then you'll go to Georgia, or you'll go to North Carolina, or you'll go to Florida, wherever there's money. And then some states take a long time to get the money to you. You know, Michigan was really hot there for a while. A lot of productions went to Michigan. It takes Michigan a long time to monetize the money and get it to the actual production. So a lot of the smaller independent projects that were depending on the money to finance the post-production actually stopped going there because it took too long for them to get the money. I was working on a film in North Carolina, and the actual post-production was all dependent on when we got the money back from the state, which is very risky. But the smaller productions, the smaller independent productions, it's been my experience, that's what they do, is they'll go in and they'll film it, and then they'll see how long it takes for them to get their money back, so they can use it to actually go in and finance their post-production or any visual effects they want to drop in, or make it any a little bit more enticing. One of the big tools that actually Entertainment Partners created is this incentive guideline. It's become probably the industry standard. We get calls for this all the time. It tells you what states offer incentives, what the incentives are, the guidelines. These are just all the states that offer incentives, the dark blue ones. The light blue ones are the ones that no longer offer incentives. The greens have US federal incentives. As you can see, almost every state has an incentive. Nevada doesn't have an incentive because of their gambling, even because they make so much money gambling, but they also have a film commissioner. And every event I ever go to, the film commissioner is always there. He's like, well, we're trying to get productions to come here, but we don't know why. You go there if you just want to see gambling, and that's about it, because they don't offer any monetary incentive. So the book just talks about the types of incentives, the benefits, the compensation, the application consideration. If you're going to film in a certain jurisdiction, you have to pay close attention to what the application consideration is, because each state has different application considerations, and each state has different requirements, and depending on where you're going, the application could be very easy or it could be very challenging. We worked on Scream 4's application for Michigan, and it was literally 4 binders. It was very in-depth. And if anything changed, then you had to go back and change your application. And their review process was probably the longest review process I've seen to date. Loan out company considerations. A lot of actors become loan outs, and then you hire their loan out instead of them. A lot of states don't like that. So there's a lot of considerations that you have to see. If the loan out is eligible spending state, and if they have to register to do business in the state, and if taxes are withheld from them, but we'll go into that a little later. And then the crew-based consideration, because if you're bringing a big budget film to, I have a friend doing a movie down in Florida right now, and they haven't been really busy lately, so there's not a lot of really A-list crew down there right now. So they have to bring a lot of the crew from Los Angeles to Florida, but the problem is that Florida has a requirement that 50% of your crew has to be Florida residents. So it'll be really interesting to see how that plays out as they're trying to entice bigger and bigger movies to go to Florida, but they don't have the crew base to have you meet the minimum requirement of 50%. And this is just a little snapshot of the inside of our book. It just shows you what is an eligible production, what's not an eligible production. A lot of states will allow you to have feature films, but there's a minimum spend requirement. They, like for instance, California won't allow you to have reality television show, but Florida will. Or game shows usually don't qualify, but other states will allow you to have game shows, talk shows. So it's all different. And one of the markets that we're trying to penetrate right now is the commercial market. And trying to, because commercials, there's a lot of money in going into these states for a specific look, especially in Florida and like Puerto Rico, because they want that Caribbean feel. So they're trying to get the commercials to qualify for incentives. And so we're working with Florida to see if we can package all those together. If you have if Bank of America films 5 commercials, and each one is $100,000, if we package those together and say, okay, this production spent $500,000 in Florida, can you treat it as one production, and it will qualify for the incentive. So that is what we are trying to get past right now. These are the different kinds of tax credits. There's the refundable, and these credits are refunds provided by the tax authorities once the production has filed an income tax return. So the easiest way to explain this is if you, let's say for instance in New York, you get a tax credit for $100, but your company owes $2 in taxes. So the state will issue you a check for $98. But the timing of that, it's around the tax season, and it has to fall within X amount of time after you've finished completing the film. And if you've completed your film after the tax season, then you have to wait the next year to get your rebate. So it's you get the money eventually, but it's not upfront and speedy like some of the other states are, or other types of incentives. There's the transferable tax credit, which is probably the most popular. And that means if I am a production company and I'm issued a tax credit for, let's say, $100, and then I can turn it around and sell it to somebody locally who has a huge tax credit, and they might pay me 80 cents on the dollar. But they can still use it against their full tax liability. A good example of this is Oprah Winfrey's company. Both her company and herself buy up every single tax credit that's issued in Illinois because her tax liability is so huge. So if she has, $400 million in tax liability, she might be able to buy like 398 million worth of tax credits, and she's made money even more because she's offering me less for my tax credits than what she's actually applying towards. So the one drawback to transferable tax credits is if the market becomes too saturated with with a lot of tax credits. Like for instance, right now in Georgia, because it's been so busy for so long, people have been holding on to their tax credits and not selling them. So they're driving the price down because you don't pay a full dollar. You usually pay, in Georgia it's been about 85 cents on the dollar, but we're afraid that it could drop as low as 77 cents. And so people are holding on to those to try to get the price to go back up. So it's kind of a waiting game. And for bigger studios like Warner Brothers, that's fine because they have that money that they can play around with. But with smaller production companies, they need to sell those credits as soon as possible. I just finished working on The Walking Dead for season 1, and they pre-sold their tax credits because they were afraid that the market would be saturated and they'd only get 70 cents on the dollar. They pre-sold it for less than what they could have sold it for if they would have held on to it for a little longer. So it's that whole, it's like playing the stock market. See that whole hedging, seeing if I hold on to it, am I going to get my full amount? Am I going to recognize what I need to recognize to fund the rest of the project? Or am I going to lose it all? So, and then the third one is just a plain out check, where this state will come in and just cut you a check for all your eligible spend. This is my favorite because it's the easiest to administer and it's the quickest to get your money back. South Carolina has a rebate. They come in and they audit your books every 2 weeks to make sure that all of your eligible South Carolina spend is flagged correctly. And then at the end of the production, you submit your final report and they give you 20% of your labor back in a check, and they give you 30% of your South Carolina spend back in a check. And so you realize it immediately. Oregon is the same way. They come in and they audit your books at the end of the show, and they issue a check within 30 days of your final submission of your final documentation saying this is how much money I spent and this is what I expect to get back. These are just some of the terms that are used frequently. A loan-out corporation is a corporation formed by an actor or other talent in the entertainment industry who wants to do business for their personal services under a corporate identity's protection. Like I said, a lot of the states don't like loan-out companies because they feel like they're hiding money or they're not paying taxes to the state. So for loan-outs for loan-out salaries to qualify, they usually have to register to business in the state, which means that the following year, they're gonna come back and do an income tax return. Or when we get into New Mexico, you can pay them through what's called a super loan-out, where their salary is paid through a non-New Mexico company, and you add on a 5.125% gross receipts tax, and then it all qualifies, which sounds like it's being a sneaky squirrel, but it's something that the actual New Mexico has approved. So then a resident is defined as any person living in the state or any other person who maintains a permanent place to live and spends them more than 6 months. Like I said, a lot of the states have requirements that you have to be a resident of the state. And to be a resident of the state, you usually have to fill out a declaration of residency, and you have to give them proof that you have been living in the state for the past 6 months, that you're, like for instance, in New Orleans, you have to prove what parish you live in because different parishes give you a different percentage back. So you have to prove that either, show them telephone bills, water bills, something that proves to the state that you are actually a Louisiana resident. Because unfortunately, when Louisiana first started, a lot of productions went into Louisiana and claimed that these people were Louisiana residents, and they weren't. And because of that and some other issues that happened along the way, the previous Film Commission of Louisiana is in the pokey right now. So that's one thing that you have to be careful of. And then a qualified production cost is just generally costs that are incurred for below the line items. Crew, facilities, prop, makeup. Some of the states, to get you to go and work in their states, will allow you to do what's called a pass-through company, which I don't know if any of you saw what happened in Iowa, was a pass-through company where the producers were buying themselves Hummers and putting it through this pass-through company and then taking the Hummer. It really wasn't a production-related expense. Because of that, Iowa no longer has a production incentive. But a lot of the states, like for instance, Louisiana and Connecticut, North Carolina, allow pass-through companies because they view it as a form of building the infrastructure, which we talked about a little bit earlier, where they might not have the grip and electric packages, but they'll allow you to rent it from a local company. Like EP is registered to do business in North Carolina. So if a production comes to us and wants to rent grip and electric equipment, they can rent it through us, and we add a markup, and it still counts as eligible spend. And right now, anything that has to do with a pass-through has to be approved by the film commissioner and the Department of Revenue before you should start doing it, because it, like Atlanta Georgia did away with it because they thought it wasn't on the up and up. So California, we'll start. These are some of the the key jurisdictions that are really hot right now that everybody seems to be talking about, and that we get a lot of phone calls every day about these incentives that people want to film there. They want to know if it's still worthwhile for them to go there. So I took a sample of the 6 of the most popular states that we seem to get called on a lot. And California is, of course, the most popular because they introduced their incentive last year. It's a non-refundable tax credit, which means I get a tax credit, but I have to actually apply it towards my taxes. I can't cash it in for money. But I can transfer it to a third party if I'm an independent film. So an independent film is a film that has a budget of between $1 and $10 million, and it's not publicly traded by, it's not 25% or more owned by a public company. So that really eliminates the amount of incentives that films in California get, because as we know, a lot of them are big studio productions that come and eat it all up. The maximum benefit is the 20% of qualifying local spend, and that's on films 1 to 75 million. Movies of the week or miniseries, 500K. And then new basic cable series. And basic cable series, I really haven't seen anything that has qualified for that yet, because I don't really know what the basic cable, I don't know if that's, I know it's not HBO or Showtime or Star or any of the ones that are making all the very successful projects right now, because they always call and want to see if they can qualify. And they've even had come up with some ideas that if they show it once on a basic cable television show, will it qualify, and then they can get the rebate, but that was knocked down by the film commissioner. 25% of the qualifying local spend for qualifying relocating television series. They refer to this as the Ugly Betty clause, because remember a couple of years ago, Ugly Betty relocated to New York City, and they thought by putting this in the California legislation about the tax credit, it would lure Betty back. But what they didn't realize is that it can't have previously filmed in California. So she didn't qualify. But what did qualify is All My Children relocated here last year, but they canceled it, so. Whatever independent films. And then California allocates $100 million per year for qualified motion pictures, and $10 million of that is for independent films. The applications are on a first-come, first-served basis, and I know that when they announce that they have more money for the incentive, people line up outside the office on Hollywood trying to get their applications submitted and qualified, because you have, I believe, 180 days. If you get accepted into the program and the funds have been set aside for you, you have 180 days to start the production. So people run to it, but a lot of people just throw their applications in because they think they might have a project or this might be greenlit. But if you get denied the first time, you should obviously continue to go back, because people fall out of the queue, and they're really good about following up, making sure people aren't going to use the incentive, and then give it to the productions that are waiting for it. One of the other criteria is 75% of the production days or the budget have to be within California. They will accept below-the-line residents and non-residents as qualifying spend, but that excludes music directors, music composers. So it's the big ticket, because music composers can take up a big chunk of your post-production budget. But they do allow editors, which is interesting. And the loan-out considerations, if you're below the line, like if you're a costume supervisor or a DP, then they'll allow you to repay through a loan-out. And right now, it is going towards June 30th of 2014. Florida's my favorite state. It's my home state, so. And it's just gotten really big again, like I said. And it's a transferable tax credit with a 5-year carry forward. You cannot claim the credits until July 1st of this year. The maximum benefit is 20% of the qualifying spend, with an additional 5% bonus for off-season, which off-season is hurricane season. So if you want to go to Florida and film during hurricane season, they give you an additional 5%. I was actually doing a film in Florida during hurricane season, and we did have to evacuate twice. So, and it was that great movie Out of Time with Denzel Washington that I think 2 people saw, so it didn't make the money that was spent getting everybody out of there. And then a 5% bonus for family-friendly projects, which the other big thing in Florida is Disney. So this is their clause. So if it's family-friendly, which is open to interpretation, then you get another 5%. They also have a 6% sales tax exemption, which is great because if you're going to buy items in the state, you give them a tax exemption certificate saying that this is for the production and they don't charge you sales tax. So that's like an additional 6% that you're adding to your goods and services. Like I said, 50% of your cast and crew must be residents or eligible students. They have a couple colleges there that they're trying to grow the film program. I know Florida State is one of them. So if you're a student in the film program, then you count towards the 50%. But this increases to 60% in 2012. And I know that Rock of Ages, the Tom Cruise, Anne Hathaway project is filming in Miami, and they're having a hard time finding qualified crew members to meet the requirement. So it'll be interesting to see how they can either work around that, or background extras count, so they might just have a lot of extras days and just put a lot of Florida residents in there to see what if there is a workaround. The minimum local spend is $625,000. The application process, you have to submit it within 15 days of filming. But then they go, and Florida pretty much goes through their application with a fine-tooth comb as well. Like they'll go, well, they'll ask you what people are doing, why you need these people, things that, in my opinion, if you're saying, okay, I'm gonna give you this incentive to come and film in the state, you shouldn't be asking me how I'm gonna create this project. You know, if I'm saying I need it, then I need it. And then you have 180 days from the approval to start the project. The qualifying compensation is only above the line, which is interesting because on burn notice, a lot of their, they went to Florida because of the incentive. A lot of their none of their high-hitting talent lived in Florida, but now because they're in, I think their 4th or 5th season, a lot of the talent has relocated to Florida. So now they're Florida resident, paying Florida taxes, which means they also get 20% of their salary back. So they're rethinking that as well. And then below the line residents, and like I said, and they have to fill out a Florida residency form that they do check during the audit. Another thing that we're just going, not the rounds, but that has just happened in Florida is the governor signed what's called an E-Verify, which is tied into the Homeland Security, which is to verify that people working on your production are not illegal aliens, and you have 3 days to validate them, and if you don't validate them, then you have to ask them to leave the production, and their spend is not qualifying labor. So it's very, because there's all these other issues right now with payroll. You ask them if they're residents of Florida, you ask them if they're U.S. citizens, they either have to fill out an I-9 giving you, copies of their birth certificate, Social Security. There's all these other things in place, but now they've added another layer of that, which the productions are not happy about because it's more manpower that they have to do and much more paperwork. And it's to June 30th, 2015. Georgia is a transferable tax credit with a 5-year carry forward. Like I said, Georgia has a lot of tax credits right now that are out there because Warner Brothers and Universal have done quite a few shows there. So there's a lot of tax credits that haven't been sold yet. So they're good for 5 years. So either they are going to hold on to them and then flood the market at the very end, or they're going to start releasing them so they can slowly maintain the level at a proper selling rate. The maximum benefits are 20% of qualifying spend. Then you get an upgrade of 10% if you include the Georgia peach. It's a Georgia logo. The problem with that is that it's an animated exploding peach. And I don't know much about editing, but however you, like on The Walking Dead was cut a certain way, and then the peach had to be fed into it, but the peach was animated and it was live action, and so it cost a lot more money to get the peach in there, but we finally got the state to say you no longer have to have the exploding peach, which was a blessing. Then you get 8% of your sales tax for anything that's used for the production. The minimum spend is $500,000. The application is, you can't submit the application no sooner than 90 days before you start filming, because I guess they were flooded with a lot of applications that never happened. The qualifying compensation are residents and non-residents qualify for both above the line and below the line, and there is no loan out company considerations to date. Actually, Georgia is probably one of the easiest states to work with because they were so successful years ago. So there's a lot of qualified crew. There's a lot of vendors that can get you your grip and electric packages, your wardrobe. So that's why it's such a destination for so many productions. And there's a lot of empty warehouses that I know the productions are using to film in. Fast and Furious 5, they're doing, the new one is on about a train, because I guess the car's story was set. So they rented a big warehouse and built a train in it, and exploded the train because there's so many empty warehouses there that was an option. Louisiana. Louisiana, like I said, is very busy as well. Universal just did Battleship there. They actually moved the final 2 Twilight movies from Canada to Louisiana. Brad Pitt is filming a big feature there right now. So it's always really big. And there's a lot of reality TV shows there because they allow reality TV to qualify for the incentive. So it's a transferable tax credit, and it has a 10-year guarantee carried forward. But what's really good about this is that if you can't find anybody to buy your tax credit, the state will buy it back to you for 85 cents on the dollar. So it's a guarantee that you're going to get 85 cents back. The maximum benefit is 30% of qualifying local spend with an additional 5% credit for the first $1 million spent on each Louisiana resident. The 5% for the first $1 million is because Brad Pitt lives there now and his paycheck is so high. So they'll give you 5% back up to the first $1 million. The production criteria, assume it's an application, and you have to tell, who's funding it, how you're going to distribute it, that it's not going to, be pornographic. A lot of the states have a pornographic clause, which is interesting because, with that age-old question, what is pornography? What is pornography to me is different than what is pornography to you. When I was working in North Carolina, there was a movie filmed with that little blonde girl that's in everything. And and now she has a sister that's in something else too. But I guess she gets raped in it, and because she got raped in it, they would not give back they would not count it as being a qualified production because they view that as pornographic. So it was part of the storyline, so now they've made it they have to read the script, they have to sign off on it. So it's very, that catch-22. Because New Mexico is the same way. The minimum spend is only $300,000. The application process is easy. Residents and non-residents qualify. One thing that they have just put into place is that if you're a production and you're leaving the state, and before will give you your money, you have to run an ad in 3 local papers saying, I am Swamp People Season 2, and I filmed here for 4 months. Do I owe you any money? And I guess because some of the productions have been stiffing the local vendors. So they want to make sure that all the local vendors are taken care of. And I think this is also a fallout of what happened in New Mexico. There was a couple productions that filmed in New Mexico where they issued the money to the production, the production didn't pay a lot of their local vendors, so now they can now they've tied it in, so if they don't pay, if the production doesn't pay the local vendor, then the state can step in and pay on their behalf. New Mexico, it's a refundable tax credit. 25% of the credit applies to resident cast and crew only, and in-state rentals, purchases, and services. Like I said, this is one state that allows entertainment partners to have the pass-through company, where if they can't find something locally, they can go to us. We actually have a facility there, and they say, you know, we need to get this giraffe crane, and we can't find it in New Mexico. Can you get it from California? So we can get it from California. We rent it to them and then put our rate on it, our 4% handling fee, and then we also have to pay a gross receipts tax on it, a New Mexico gross receipts tax, and then it qualifies. But the gross receipt tax qualifies towards your, as part of your New Mexico spend. There's no local minimum spend requirement. You have to acknowledge that the film was filmed in New Mexico. New Mexico is really busy right now with the biggest movie they ever have had. It's Avengers, the new Disney Marvel production that was originally slanted for New Mexico and Michigan, but because of the uncertainty of the Michigan incentive, Disney has pulled it from Michigan and is now up to the shooting days in New Mexico and is going to Ohio to do the exteriors, which is interesting because I'm not aware of a lot of productions going to Ohio yet. The residents and the non-residents qualify for above the line, but the non-residents, it's for what they call a super loan out, where their salary is run through a non-New Mexico entity that, like for instance, when we were working on a project, they would submit the time cards to us because EP has a super loan out that's registered to do business in the state of New Mexico, but doesn't have you can't have an actual facility there. So this part of our company doesn't have an actual facility or the tax would be higher. Then we in turn pay the performer and charge a gross receipt tax on it, so it qualifies. And this is something that the state actually came to us and said, look, we want productions to come to New Mexico, but we need to make sure that we're getting taxed on these people that are making a lot of money. How can we do it? So Joe Kianese, my boss, worked with the state to come up with a super loan out to process the payment through it. And it's only for actors and stunt people. It's only people in front of the camera. So if you have a stunt rigger, I know that Avengers is having a lot of stunt riggers come to rig the stunts for the hundreds of stunt people who are coming. Their salary won't qualify. So they're trying to look locally for stunt people. New York, it's a refundable tax credit. And a lot of productions go to New York regardless of whether or not there's a tax credit or not because they want the look of New York. Like right now, Spider-Man is going there and they're not even going, they haven't even applied for the credit. They don't really care about the credit. They just want the look. So some of the larger productions feel that way. Like I know Batman is going to Philadelphia and they don't really care about the incentive. They just want to go there and go for the look. Because I think they think that the production is going to make so much money that they really don't, and it's funded by Warner Brothers and Sony. So people see that and they have deep pockets. But the New York state refund is paid out if you get $1 million or less, you get it in 1 year. If it's between 1 to 5 million, you get it in 2 years. And if it's over 5 million, you get it in 3 years. So, like I said, this isn't beneficial for somebody that needs the money up front to complete their project if they're getting more than $5 million. The maximum benefit is 30% of qualifying production local spend, facility location, and post-production cost, plus an additional 5% refundable New York City. The New York City 5% has already been gone for this year. So you only get the 30%. And then if you're doing your post-production there, you can get an additional 10%. But you can't get the 10% if you're getting the 30%. And then they look at productions in 2 levels, level 1 and level 2. Level 1 has a budget of no more than 15 million and no more than 5% owned by a publicly traded company. and you need to shoot at least one full day on a set built for the production for the at a New York qualified production facility. And what that is when they went back and wrote this law, this legislation, a bunch of people that own these big warehouses that they built for productions went to them and said, look, you need to make it enticing for people to come back to New York, but you also need to make sure that they use the existing facilities. Because when we were here and we were operating, we were employing a lot of local people. So they've made it one of their requirements is that you have to film in a qualified production facility. And it's very confusing, like what you have to, the best thing is to talk to the film commissioner, Pat Kaufman, because she'll tell you what's a qualified production facility for level 1 and what's a qualified production facility for level 2. And you have to spend so many days at each facility shooting, and so much of your overall budget has to be there. So 75% of your total of all expenses have to, if you're filming, you have to film X amount of days at a qualified production facility. But that day, those days you film there have to be in direct relation to what you're filming elsewhere. Because what was happening is people were coming in and saying, oh, we'll film here at this qualified production facility. And they could be filming like movie A, but then go out on the street and be filming movie B, so they don't correlate with one another and trying to get the money for both of them. So they have this test now to make sure that what you're filming on the facility is actually going to be used in the production. Level 2 is 15 million, no more than 5%, more than 5%, and it's the same. It's just, you have to, a level 2 qualified production facility, you have to have X amount of days filmed there. You have to, when you administer this credit, you usually have to break out all your spending into all these different categories so you can go back and prove to them, this was my budget, this is how much I spent at this qualified production facility, this is how much I shot on location, these are my New York residents, these are my non-New York residents. It gets very confusing. The application has to be submitted at least 10 to 180 days. The line of considerations, there's none to date. It's only below the line residents. Above the line does not qualify. So your writers, directors, talent. So that could be a big, huge money. North Carolina's just become hot again. It is a refundable tax credit. They actually just wrote the incentive requirements, so it's 25% of your qualifying local spend. They allow pass-throughs. The minimum spend is $250,000. The application process is really easy. You just send an email to the film commissioner saying, I'm going to film here. And they send one back saying, good. And then both residents and non-residents, below the line residents and non-residents. The tricky thing about North Carolina is that whenever you have a loan out, they have to pay 4% tax, which they can register to do business in the state of North Carolina, but you don't want to tell them to do that because if they don't pay the 4% tax, then their salary does not qualify. Some just jurisdiction updates. Arizona no longer has an incentive. It had one for a while. It was just killed last week. There's a new governor of New Mexico who is trying to drastically reduce the incentive, but they signed a $50 million per year incentive with 25%. North Carolina wants to make it a tax credit and not transferable. But if you go to our website, we update that every day with whenever we have things that come across our desk, we get on it to put it up on the web. Like I said, we have other services. Our EPPS purchasing services. It's where states have allowed us to go in and set up shop and run through items through our EPPS purchasing. Right now we do it in North Carolina, Connecticut, New Mexico, Philadelphia. So it allows items to qualify that wouldn't regularly qualify because they're not available within the state. In Connecticut, they built a big a big stage there where they film Maury and Jerry Springer and all the talk shows that are on in the middle of the day that nobody really watches. But, you know, they have all those, they have like dental experts, forensic, lie detectors, babysitters, where they say they can't get those services in Connecticut, so they allow us to run them through our EPPS purchasing from the New York vendors that they're used to getting. Because I guess all those people are have to be certified and bonded and all that good stuff. Administrative services, you know, it's good that all these states have these production incentives that they offer, but what we're realizing is that a lot of the producers do not understand how to administer them. So they can say, oh great, we're gonna get 30% back. And they don't know what the steps are to make that happen. So what we've just recently added to our menu of services is that we'll administer the tax incentive for you. So we'll go in and meet with your production accountant and your producer and say, these are the eligible spend. This is, if you want to maximize your incentive for this state, you need to buy locally, you need to have items that you are buying on the internet shipped to a local store, pick it up there and pay the local sales tax if applicable, so it'll count towards your eligible spend. You need to free field your labor correctly. You need to hire as many local residents as possible. And then what we do is we go through and we will submit the final application for you. We will meet with the auditors. We will answer any questions and help you streamline the process so you can maximize your incentive as soon as possible. Another thing we have just started offering is we are working with a group of Fortune 100 companies that want to buy your tax credits, because in the past producers would be like, great, I have this tax credit, now what do I do with it? They don't know where to go. So now we offer it so they can come to us and we will tell them, we act as the middleman. Not so much as a broker, but we just match up people that are selling it with people that want it. And we've been met with a lot of really good response.